And then finally, we'll close with a conclusive dialogue. So I'll pass it over to Dr. Teresa Montaño.
Good morning, everyone. It's my honor and privilege to begin with the land acknowledgement. As we come together today, we acknowledge that we are on the traditional homelands of California's First People. Let us acknowledge their past, present, and future contributions to our California culture, as well as their struggles to be resilient in passing on their words, their songs, and traditions, and in caring for the lands that we all occupy. A land acknowledgement is a critical step towards working with Native communities. It's an attempt to secure meaningful partnerships and to pledge stewardship and protection of the land upon which we are guests. So I invite you all to write your names and the land that you occupy. I am coming to you today from Tongvalan. Next slide, please. Selecting the ancestors for today's theme was really hard for me to do. So I had to develop a personal theme, something that I felt represented in Lak'ech in my heart and in my mind and in my daily life. So I selected those that I felt represented radical healing, sacred truth, affirmation and action, and most of all, borrowing from the words of Bell Hooks, who is one of my ancestors to acknowledge today, those that represent the outlaw culture. So I opened today's session with 4 people who have embodied the words of radical healing and affirmation, not just in the words that they write, although for all 4 of them, listening to their speeches, reading their works, watching them on video today represent the radical healing that we all engage in. So the 4 ancestors I selected today are Bell Hooks, Larry Itliong, Gloria Ansaldúa, and John Trudell. And then I invite you to think about 4 individuals, solidarity, and the work of ethnic studies that you think represent the In Lak'ech for you. Next. We're going to begin today with our cultural energizer. Again, looking and viewing and owning the In Lak'ech, not just as words that we recite as an affirmative pledge that we make each morning or each day, but what the In Lak'ech means in action. And so it's my pleasure to introduce this morning, Ricky Medina.
Hey, good morning, buenos dias, Kualitlanetsi. So cultural energizer this morning. I don't know if Billy McMillan Ruiz is on, and I don't think so. There's been some complications, but Billy McMillan Ruiz is a youth we wanted to bring forward for our cultural energizer, because our youth, ain't no power like the power of the youth, because the power of the youth doesn't stop, right? So bringing them to energize us, but there must have been some kind of challenges this morning with them getting on. So what I'd like to do is introduce this part for Billy. This is actually Billy's work, and Billy was introduced to in Lak'ech when they were in middle school in a 7th grade. It was probably about over 10 years ago, and they were in a program that I was actually supporting with. It was a Institute for Student Activism, and so we utilize In Lak'ech as a way that we open space, as a reminder of how we carried and conducted ourselves in that space. But we also utilized it as a teaching concept. And so this individual took it in Lak'ech and carried it with them. And so their work was going to be today, this morning, to really speak about how they've carried in Lak'ech since middle school on to now. And recently, they were involved in much of the much protest that was happening in DC. And so what I like to do with this culture energizer is share a video footage that this individual captured and utilized of their protest work in DC.
No peace. No peace. No peace.
Tú eres mi otro yo.
You are my other me.
Si te hago daño a ti,
If I do harm to you,
me hago daño a mí mismo.
I do harm to myself.
Si te amo y respeto,
If I love and respect you,
me amo y respeto yo.
I love and respect myself.
Tú eres mi otro yo.
You are my other me.
Si te hago daño a ti,
If I do harm to you,
me hago daño a mí mismo.
I do harm to myself.
Si te amo y respeto,
If I love and respect you,
me amo y respeto yo.
I love and respect myself.
Tú eres mi otro yo.
You are my other me.
Si te hago daño a ti,
If I do harm to you,
me hago daño a mí mismo.
I do harm to myself.
Si te amo y respeto,
If I love and respect you,
me amo y respeto yo.
I love and respect myself.
No justice.
No peace.
No justice.
No peace.
No justice.
No peace.
No justice.
No peace.
Say
No peace.
his name.
George Floyd.
Say 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 his name.
George Floyd. George Floyd. George Floyd.
Say his name.
George Floyd.
Say his name.
George Floyd.
Say his name.
George Floyd.
So, just providing a little bit of background once again, knowing that this individual had an opportunity to engage with this concept of in Lak'ech, which is really the topic of our work today, knowing that they had this opportunity to engage with this while a middle school student in 7th grade, starting there and now carrying it, right, over 10 years later as an adult now. So I'll ask, let's drop this in the chat. And what kind of feelings and reflections does it invoke, right? Knowing that a young person was able to learn this concept in a schooling space and is able to now carry on in their life. So for you, what kind of feelings and reflections may this all invoke as we start today's lesson and session? And I appreciate a lot of just reflections and feelings that you have. Today I wanted to do this justice. Once again, I want to bring their name in, Billy McMillan Ruiz, and I hope everything's going on okay with them. Whatever happened this morning, not sure, but I was hoping I was able to bring your work in, Billy, do justice into all that you're doing, and how in Lak'ech continues to carry in your life and in your work. And we'll pass it back to you, Teresa.
Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Memo, who is going to talk about what the in Lak'ech means to students. Memo?
Buenos dias, relatives coming from you to be honored here, honoring our ancestors and here in the land, the Kumeyaay land. If we can move on to the next slide, please. So it's very important that all the work that we do, it connects with the guidelines and values of ethnic studies. So, we don't just pick stuff randomly, right? Everything has to be connected, have to have its purpose. So as a cultural practice and in trainings or in meetings, we usually go over the 7 C's. So I was wondering maybe we can have some volunteers and just read it aloud, because I think it makes a difference when you're here instead of just reading it. So I'll start with the first one, and then someone can just jump in after me. So the first guiding principle is cultivate empathy, community actualization, cultural perpetuity, self-worth, self-determination, and the holistic well-being of all participants, especially Native peoples and people of color. So can someone join me and read number 2, please?
Celebrate and honor Native peoples of the land and communities of color by providing a space to share their stories of struggle and resistance, along with their cultural wealth.
Thank you, Trish.
Center and place high value on pre-colonial, ancestral, indigenous, diasporic, familial, and marginalized knowledge.
Thank you, Lupe.
Critique. Oh, dang it. Go ahead.
Critique systems of power and their relationship to white supremacy, racism, patriarchy, and other forms of oppression.
Challenge imperialist, colonial, hegemonic beliefs and practices on the ideological, institutional, interpersonal, and internalized levels.
Thank you, Gretel.
Connect ourselves to past and contemporary resistant movements that struggle for social justice on the global and local levels.
And thank you, my homie Tere. Good to see you.
Conceptualize, imagine, and build new possibilities for post-imperial life that promotes collective narratives of transformation, transformative resistance, critical hope, and radical healing.
Thank you, Ricky, and thank you for being brave and read off the 7 C's. So I'm going to give you a positive affirmation. You all shine like a diamond. So, so we can move on to the next slide. So if you think about it, and in my classroom, we start with the affirmation of Lak'ech based on the poem of Pensamiento Serpentino by Luis Valdés. But you know, I don't have a classroom rule. I don't start the day with like, hey, let's get to work. You know, I just you know, come and say En Lak'ech, and then students start reciting the poem. We usually do it in different languages as well, depending on the community we're in, to be able to incorporate different languages with this sentiment. But if we go back to the 7 C's, can someone tell me which 7 C's is the poem En Lak'ech connected to? Should we come back to the slide to remind folks? And you can just put it in the chat. Which of the 7 C's you think the affirmation of En Lak'ech is connected with? Celebrate, cultivate, connect, cultivate. Yeah. So when you start thinking about it, connects with all 7, actually. It connects with all 7 of the ethnic studies values and guidelines. So this is just a reminder that, you know, that we're not doing this just because it's a fad. We're doing it because it has a purpose, it has a goal. Come on to the next slide, please. Here's another version that you can also incorporate in the lower grades, like in kindergarten. So if you look at our lessons, you know, our lessons, we have lessons for the liberal ethnic studies model curriculum that adheres to the different grade levels. So here's something that you can start doing early on, right? Pre-K or kindergarten. And, you know, we use TPR. So you are my other me. So all students point to themselves and each other. If I do harm to you, you know, they do the sobbing gesture, you know, I'm doing harm to myself. And then, but if I love and respect you, right, I put the right hand over the heart and point to another peer, I love and respect myself. And then they hug themselves. So here's another version that you can incorporate doing En Lak'ech. So so looking at you know, another thing that we do is we start, you know, we reflected this sentiment, right, also known as the golden rule, right, that if you start researching ancient civilizations or different communities, that we all have something very similar. You know, I was researching in my land, El Salvador, and trying to find if there's any literature that adheres to the Pipil people. And Roque Dalton does have a few affirmations of the Pipil Mayan people, right? Also with the same sentiment. Later on, my colleague Dindy is going to go elaborate more on the Ubuntu, but I wanted to highlight Ubuntu is very similar to En Lak'ech, and even our interim superintendent uses this affirmation in his communication with our district. So Lupe, I don't know if I can share my screen just for a bit. So here's just one of the emails that we just got from our superintendent. As you can see on the bottom, he also practiced this sentiment, right? So this is how we humanize ourselves in our classroom. This is just kind of like, okay, let's get to work. We have a purpose, right? And a purpose is not only to use education to improve ourselves, right? But to love each other, to love humanity, to love Mother Nature. So we can go back to the slides, please. So during lunch, I have several students that I had throughout the years, and that's what I like still teaching in the school is that connection with students and being able to have that relationship. So I have students come that I had in the past, and current students come during lunch, and just we just touch bases. We some of them need help with some personal stuff or homework. And I had them, record a little. I put them in the spot, and I put them in the spot and asked them a few questions. Here's another of the lessons that we do in our class. We want to make sure that in Lak'ech is a real, right? It's not just words on the paper. It's not just something that we say, but students actually reflect and analyze. This is just a brief introductory exercise that we do. Students reflect what Lak'ech looks in real life. How do you practice it? They can either draw images, they can copy and paste images, or they can write examples. And also what it doesn't look like. Well, what's the opposite? And then what does it sound like? Right? Well, if someone is implementing Lak'ech and interactions with each other, what will it sound like? And also the most important, what does it feel like? And then at the end, we have students have a conversation on what does Lak'ech mean to them and how they will apply it in the daily life, right? Because we don't want this just to be a practice in the classroom. We want them to carry this throughout their lives and throughout their interactions with each other. But I can tell you many things about Lak'ech, but let's hear from the students themselves. So this is students, they came during lunch and I just put them in the spot and I thought I gave you access, but it didn't work, Lupe. Do you want me to share from my screen?
Yeah, you can go ahead and share from your screen.
Okay.
That might be better. Yeah.
Gotta love this Zoom, huh? All right, so can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So here is Cielo.
Hello, my name is Cielo Salas, and I am currently a junior in Lincoln High School. And Lak'ech to me means to respect others the way you want to be treated. And I learned this in my sophomore year in Mr. Ochoa's class, and to this day, Mr. Gomez is still teaching it. And I apply Lak'ech in my daily life by helping others out if they need help. For example, at work, if they're short on change, I just leave it like that. I still give them the food and everything. Or if they don't have enough money for something, I get it for them, I'll pay for it. And that's it.
Thank you, Flor.
And here is my homie Ivis.
My name is Ivis Carrasco. I'm in 12th grade. And to me, Lak'ech means the way of honoring someone, the way we honor each other as people, and how we try to make each other feel as humans, same level. Don't try to degrade anyone or feel above anyone. It's the way we all feel. I learned it in 9th grade. Mr. Gomez, he's during class, 9th grade, he implied it to everyone. And since then, I've been trying to use it. In my life, or how I use it, keep it in mind is with people, just try to be friendly, be nice to them. Act as everyone's your own family. Being nice to everyone and trying to just live that way.
Okay. I had two more, but can't find them now. Here.
my name is Grace Alvarenga. I am currently a senior at Lincoln High School, and I learned in Lak'ech in government with Mr. Gomez. And in Lak'ech, to me, is just a reminder that people, like, you got to see yourself in other people's like shoes. You got to respect them. You got to treat them like your own self. And what's it called? I apply this to my everyday life by being kind to other people as if they were to be me. Like saying hi, waving at them, greeting them, and yeah.
Thank you.
And we'll finish up with Jay Sean.
Hello, my name is Jay Sean Smith. I am currently a 12th grader at Lincoln High School. And I learned in Lak'ech 9th grade in Mr. Gomez classroom. In Lak'ech is it means like to respect others and treat others how you want to be treated. And like, you know what I'm saying? Just like going through life, being nice and not being like mean to nobody, nothing like that. Or just like have fun type stuff. And I apply to my everyday life by like respecting my brothers, my sisters, just my family in general, just everybody, being nice to them.
All right, thank you.
It's not just content, it's a way of life. And it's cool because, you know, there's times when I haven't seen students in a few years and I will run into them on campus or in the community, and the first thing comes to my mind is Mr. Gomez and Lak'ech. So it's a living thing. But thank you. Any questions?
Memo, someone asked if you might be able to share one of the translations.
Okay. We have one in our ESAC. We have actually it's translated into Hebrew. We have one in Hebrew. I don't have it with me. We have one in French as well. And
We have Arabic.
Arabic, and we have another translation in Arabic, but we can actually make a copy of that and maybe put it in our website, so you can have access to it.
That sounds great. That's what we'll do is we'll get those copies and we'll put them on our Liberated website for all of you to be able to access.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you, Memo. Is Samya on?
I'm here.
Okay, so without, that was how excited I am for Samya's lesson. All right, so I'm just going to turn it over to her, and she will also do a presentation on how one might present the In Lak'ech in the classroom. Okay. You're on.
Good morning. Buenos dias. Sabah al khair. I am coming to you actually from one of our school sites because we are running ethnic studies PD right now too on an all-day Saturday, focused on, you know, continuing to deepen our in Lak'ech pedagogy in our ethnic studies classes in our district. Actually, I got Sean. I know he's presenting later. He's here too, helping facilitate our professional development. So thank you. I am honored and humbled to be in this community space and to talk about, you know, something that is very like dear and near and sacred in both our program. And I'll talk a little bit, and especially in a newcomer program that I oversee and run. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. But if we can go to the next slide, we can get started. So just a little context, because I know you've done some stuff this morning, is in our district, we have an ethnic studies program for all of our ninth graders. It is a grad requirement. We are building, and this year piloting a course that we call that freshman class. It's a semester long intro to ethnic studies. At the upper division, we have 3 sites piloting a year-long elective called Advancing Ethnic Studies. We have about 4 sections across our district, and they are all full because students had such a great experience. Freshmen year that they were looking, right, for more. So these lessons in different ways I'm going to kind of facilitate to talk about this are at the high school level. So I know you've probably read and seen the poem already, so we won't do that. On the right, I think a lot of you may recognize, right, those kind of little pictures that people were putting together when we went into the pandemic. So this one is of our Bridge staff, which is a newcomer program that serves 11th and 12th graders coming in. In our district, it's predominantly from Central America and then predominantly from Guatemala. Interrupted formal education, right, behind in credits. And so we built this program. We currently have 63 students. This year we've had a huge influx, but we built our program around in Lak'ech, in centering it as our way of being in our community, and our teachers using it as an anchor in how and what they teach, so that, you know, that was what we sent them. So what I'd like to do is, since you are familiar from the lessons presented earlier, is do a little activity. And so I'm going to ask Lupe for some help to get people into breakout rooms of 4 to 5 in a minute. And what you're going to do is, and then also we'll link, I have a Jamboard. There's 11 different slides. So maybe pay attention when you get to your breakout room, what number you were, so you can use that slide. And I want you to think about, what does in Lak'ech mean? And what does it look like and feel like, as an example of what you can do with your students? And I'll show you in a few minutes kind of the work when we did this with our students, the work that it yielded. But after you read the poem with your students, and before you like start getting really deep, right, and feeling like you have to explain it, and students will amaze you with their ability to interpret, right, this. So what you're going to do is use the kind of Post-it note feature on the Jamboard to think about, what does this poem mean? And what does it look like, right, if we are acting this out or in a classroom space? And what does it feel like? Because you can't just be like, okay, class, here's a poem, let's read it. And this is what we're going to do. And we're going to read it every day. I've been in classrooms, like full transparency, where that's what they do. They read it at the beginning of the class, but you can feel that community space is not in Lak'ech with each other, right? It doesn't look like students reading it at the beginning of class, sitting in their nice little rows, you know, raising their hand all the time, waiting to be called on, and then 90 minutes class ends. That is not what it means, looks like, and feels like. So have a conversation in your group, get some things onto your Jamboards. We'll come back. I'll take a few, we'll look at a few examples, and then I'll share a couple of lessons with you all. So you'll have, I'm going to say about 8 minutes in your groups to do that. Can you help me with that, Lupe?
Absolutely. So you just want me to open the breakout rooms?
I want you to open the breakout rooms, and then I can put the Jamboard in. I'm going to put that in the chat. I'll put that right now in the chat so people have access to it.
Okay, so just to be clear, each group is going to be submitting one Jamboard?
Yeah, so each group, everybody should have editing rights, and they're numbered. So there's 12. So whatever group you're in, use that slide.
Okay, so there are only 12 slides. Okay, so let me change the number of breakout rooms. Okay, I think we're ready.
More, do we want to have, I see the number of participants. Let me do a couple. Oh, there, I see it. Okay, there's 14.
14 now? Okay. Awesome. Somebody just entered. Let me recreate so that we get everybody included. And let me know when you're ready. I'll go ahead and open the rooms.
I'm ready. And I'm just going to fix one slide. Everyone, yeah, just use the slide for your room number and you'll have 8 minutes, and then we'll come back together. So let's open them.
Okay, sounds good. I'm going to put the Jamboard one more time because somebody just arrived, and here we go.
In the year 1970, in the city of San Diego, under the Coronado Bridge, I had a little piece of land. A piece of land that the community of Logan Heights wanted to make into a park. A park where all the chavalitos could come and play in so they wouldn't have to play in the street anymore and get run over by a car. A park where all the viejitos could come and just sit down and watch the sun go down in the tarde. A park where all the familias could come and just get together on a Sunday afternoon and celebrate the spirit of life itself. But the city of San Diego said, chale, we're gonna make a highway patrol substation here, man. So on April the 22nd, 1970, La Raza of Logan Heights and other Chicano communities of San Diego got together and they organized and they walked on the land and they took it over with their picks and their shovels and they began to build their park. And today, that little piece of land under the Coronado Bridge is known to everybody as Chicano Park. It began in 1970.
Hey, do you see that one person needs to be put into the breakout room?
In San Diego, where my people began to fight for Chicano Park, for Chicano Park, under the bridge, under the bridge, under the bridge. Continue to live, my brother. We shall continue to fight, my friend. We shall continue to live, my brother. We shall continue to fight, my friend. For Chicano Park, under the bridge. For Chicano Park, under the bridge. Continue to live, my brother. We shall continue to fight, my friend. We shall continue to live, my brother. We shall continue to fight, my friend. For Chicano Park, under the bridge. For Chicano Park, under the bridge. barrios unidos. Que vivan, que vivan. Los 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 barrios unidos.
¡Chicana! ¡Que viva la raza!
My friend, we've jumped up again.
Just closed all the rooms, so they'll have a
You tried, but we won't give in. We're proud of our brown skin, and though you try again, we can't let you in. Oh yes, we have fought your wars and died like we did before. We've attended
We're coming back.
all bias
Right. Thank you. Looks like people had lots of fruitful conversation. Maybe we can start here and then maybe we can skip through a few of these, Lupe, to see what people put. I love all of what I see right here. And I love this accountability and love for selves and collective community, right? Love for me and love for you, building a sense of community. See what else, can go back a couple, we'll just pick a couple. Circle discussion, students are facing each other, talking to each other. Okay, I wanna hone in on that because that is a specific classroom practice, right? Doing this, and we'll look at kind of what students yielded. You have to think about, okay, like recognizing the humanity in one another. That's great, right? That's absolutely what this means and feels like. What is the classroom practice that's going to cultivate that? So circle discussions are one of them, right? I think I mentioned we're doing ethnic studies PD. We started with the opening circle, right? An opening circle with teachers. Considering, I saw one on there that said, considering other factors shaping students' experiences, right? Punitive regulations that aren't restorative, COVID. I've seen a kid walks back in class, 5 days, 6 days, maybe they were at home with COVID. Oh, where have you been? You know, or we missed you. Where have you been? Yeah, it doesn't, in Lak'ech doesn't look like asking that in front of 30 other students. Let's look at a couple more of what people put. Dialogue first, people first, greet before work, vulnerability, dynamic, basic needs met, check in. Amen. It looks like saying hello to your students, saying good morning. And I know everybody on here, because you're here, are like, duh. I'm in a lot of classrooms. I get around, right? I have a district level job and I'm in charge of implementation of lots of programs. And so I get into classrooms all the time. It amazes me when the kids shuffle in, sit down, and the teacher's like, here's our agenda. Let's start. Do now, without even saying good morning or greeting them. So I love this one little sticky note that encompasses so much. Let's look at one more. Heart work, learning to be empathetic with others, especially what they're going through. If you're my other me and you are my oppressed or opposed to me, I still apply in Lak'ech to our relationship. Beautiful. Thank you. Right? Love that. Let's go back to the slides and let's look when students were asked to do this, what it yielded. Go to the next slide. I think maybe, yes. So you can see on the right, the same activity of introducing the poem and then saying, okay, what does this look like, feel like, and how are we going to practice this, right? And all the things students wrote on the stickies, right? This is from one period, all the different things that they wrote and a lot of the same things you all wrote. On the left is another way you might introduce this. This is from, I'm crediting my teachers who are right here, right? The Saturday, they're here engaging in PD right now. This is from their classroom. So the right was at one school and the left is a different assignment. And I know you'll get these slides. So I actually have the full assignment of the introducing in Lak'ech to your students linked. Okay, so you can check that out later. But again, it's looking at the poem, thinking about what does this look like? What does it feel like? And how do we have to act in community for one another, right? Which is, yeah, I'm not using an unwanted like nickname to refer to you. I'm not using derogatory language and then saying I'm joking or I'm kidding. And you have to be explicit about those pieces with students. Oh yeah, love this, right? I see something in the chat. One time we used this as part of our social contract and morning meeting, then incorporated it back into back to school night presentation for parents. If you go one more slide, I think we can kind of see some of these sticky notes closer that students wrote, right? Feels like warmth, love, acceptance, and support. Feels like a positive, right, and welcoming environment. It says in Lak'ech should feel like a sense of respect, right, for yourself and others. So the next step after students kind of do this piece is then asking them, okay, how do we, not just I as a teacher, because this is our classroom space, right? A teacher has to decenter themselves. How do we create this? How do we create a space of love? How do we create a space of acceptance? What does that mean? The piece of support, what does that look like, right? It says it feels like people being nice to you, right? And so really putting the ownership on students. And if somebody does kind of break, right, this community, what is the process for rehealing? Are you going to have a circle? Are you going to give students an opportunity to address it, right? And so asking them how they're going to cultivate what they have on the sticky notes, what kind of processes, right, they want to go through to create what they feel like is an in Lak'ech community. You can go to the one more slide. Okay. I talked a little bit about this program. This is my babies at Bridge, right? And we run our entire program on it in Lak'ech Pedagogy. And so this is from our first and second day of school. Again, introducing the poem and really getting into the indigenous roots of it. I think I talked about the fact that most of our students are from Guatemala. We have students from El Salvador, Mexico, Honduras. And so after breaking down the poem, and they love that it's English and Spanish, giving them some time, we give them just 2 lines. Right. So we assign in groups just 2 lines. So like you might have the tú eres mi otro yo, I am your, you are my other me, or you might have si te hago daño a ti, right? If I do harm to you. So we break them up in groups, we give them 2 lines and then ask them the same thing. Interpret, what does that mean, right? What does that look like? How do you have to act, right? And so for them, it's a little easier with newcomers to deal with just chunking it, right? And then they present their work, and then we have them kind of stand, right, in order of the poem. And so you kind of have this different, right, a display of the students with the poem. And then we follow it up and we do a community circle. And we really talk about, like, if we, right, our goal is to be this, what does that mean? And let me tell you, we use that from in our classroom and our kind of teachers incorporating it, right, and being culturally responsive to our discipline. I have a lovely student who, you know, despite multiple attempts and interventions, still decided to, you know, transgress and smoke. I don't have to go into the details of what on campus. And, you know, we have to do the family meeting, and this is after like several kind of processes, and I had to send him home, and I hate to do that. We already tried the in-house. And so this is after multiple things. And before we got to the third, you know, his kind of the third time, the second time, you know, we brought in the family, and they're like, okay, we know there's a consequence. Is that a suspension? I said, oh, no, when we do our, you know, family circles on Friday, you don't need to say exactly what you did, but like we brought in like the paper of in Lak'ech and said, okay, what did you violate? You know, and he said, like, if I do harm to, you know, if I do harm to myself, I do harm to our community. I'm like, right. So you need to ask for forgiveness. You need to restore the community. I said, you tell what you want. And sure enough, on Friday, I mean, this kid, right, in front of his 20, you know, the group he's in, his peers, and they all like first gave him all this advice, right? You escaped from, you know, Guatemala, you came here, you this, that, like, you can't do this, that stuff. You can't be with bad people. And then they loved on him because that's what we do. And, you know, even after all of that, when the third time came and I had to do, you know, whatever the administrator duties of like the suspension in the family and getting him into a program before they left, he stood up and I said, dude, I love you. I still love you. It's okay. I know you know I'm mad at you, but I still love you because this is what we do. And you're going to come back and we're going to welcome you, you know, and I love you because yes, even as a teenager, tú eres mi otro yo, it could be my son. This is how I want somebody to treat him, you know, or my daughter, if they make mistakes. And so you have to get kids to practice it all the time and you remind them. So like that poster you saw with all the sticky notes, I see that teacher all the time, right? Having that up and referring to it. Okay, so that's, let's see. I got a direct question and I actually want to address this because it's come up a lot in my district. And so the question is around how our district handles white teachers teaching ethnic studies, right? Are there concerns with white teachers using this framework that's so rooted in indigenous philosophy, and how can white teachers incorporate the critical concept in an authentic and respectful way? I'm going to take a minute, since I have, I think, 3 minutes left, to actually answer this question, because in my district, we do have white teachers teaching ethnic studies. There's no way really around it. We have some schools where their entire departments are white. And that's why we do this professional development. That's why, right, we have teachers here. And one of the big tenets we do is like, you have to do the self work, right? And when you are teaching this, like teach the history and the background of it, and then decenter yourself and let students be at the center of it. And if you're willing, I'm often asked that, like, do you think white teachers? I'm like, well, we have them. And I'll be honest, we've had teachers of color that was like also, and I'm like, ooh, you know, I feel like your identity, yeah, I'll be like very fully transparent and honest that like, I do feel like teachers, BIPOC, teachers with a background in ethnic studies who like have done this work and want to do this work, like it is awesome for students to be able to see them facilitating, right, these classes in this work. I also work in a district where 80+% of our teachers happen to be white. So that's not always going to be reality. And also work in a district where some of my white teachers are better than my teachers of color, because they have been fully transparent with their students. Like, I'm a learner too, and I need to learn, and this is my positionality, and I'm fully aware of my positionality as a white person, like trying to facilitate these conversations. So that's why, right, I want to give kind of your, the power, and put the power in students' hands. So I think, if you have teachers who are not willing to do that, then it does get harder, right? Because I do have teachers that aren't using in Lak'ech in the way that we want them to, because they feel that tension, right, of what was mentioned around it being an indigenous philosophy that they don't have a connection with or can't uphold. Are there other questions that people have about any of these lessons, right? Or any of the resources, and you'll have access to them. So the last thing I would say is, please, don't rush this, okay? Don't rush this. I think sometimes people get in a rush of like, oh, we have to do these lessons and our class is only a semester and I want to teach all of these things. This is the most important thing, because it's not only a lesson that you're teaching and a poem that you're teaching, it's the anchor for which you can really build all your lessons and work around and the course around. At least that's what we hope to have happening in our classes here in my district. So that's what I got.
Thank you. Thank you, Samia.
Absolutely.
Next slide, please. So what we also wanted to do in teaching the lessons is to actually have some discussion or conversation or presentation on the foundations of the In Lak'ech, right? The pensamiento, the sempierte. And so Michael Dominguez is going to be our next presenter. Michael?
All right, thank you all. It's great to be here with everyone today. What we are, like Teresa said, what we're going to be doing is kind of looking at foundations and really not just for In Lak'ech, but more broadly for what this means, how this is located in ethnic studies, what it reflects on, what it sort of like implies for us. But just to get us started, if we go to the next slide. I want everyone to take a minute, and I want you to think about either your own classroom experiences, things you remember from like your own schooling and student experiences, or things you've had to do in your classroom recently. And just throw them in the chat. Think of for a moment, what cultural illusions do you remember coming up in your schooling experiences? So this could be as a student, or things that you teach. So cultural illusions, of course, cultural illusions being connections to other ideas, other stories, other sort of like themes from other content. So things that come up in literature that link to other literature or other stories. So any cultural illusions you can kind of think of making. Examples, right? For cultural illusions is, right, I'm reading a story that echoes, right, maybe a biblical story, right? That this modern novel is meant to be a repeat or a retelling of the story of Cain and Abel in some way. So that's what we're talking about with illusions. Give it another minute here. Let people do some thinking on their own. And the expectation here is probably that, as Lupe mentioned, right, like there's not going to be much related to maybe our cultures, but what were the ones that popped up for you? Give it 30 more seconds. All right. Well, yeah, like there's having some pop in here. So as please, if you can remember any more, right, like throw them in the chat. But where I'm going with this and what I want to contextualize this is we are, of course, here in part under the shadow of pressures and tensions and claims that discussions of indigenous concepts like in Lak'ech, like Manawi, like Ubuntu, like Ashe, that they're somehow religious, that there's somehow indoctrination, that they're somehow carrying some sort of like insidious message. But when we look back actually at our schooling and we think about our schooling as like Josue mentioned, and where I forget, let me see, as Violeta mentioned, right? When you think about the schooling that we often did have, right, whether it was terribly representative or not, the reality is that we actually are just like inundated with allusions, like cultural allusions to the Bible. Like if you can't fully read Shakespeare or read Shakespeare well without understanding all of the biblical allusions that are made to it. Similarly to Greek and Roman mythology, right? Think about all the stories of they're words that have become part of our, our just kind of casual dialogue. Narcissism, right, goes to Greek and Roman mythology. The idea of these things are pulled, they're allusions to other stories, other traditions of knowledge that were wrapped up in fact, right, like faith and religious tradition. So our normal Eurocentric curriculum is just awash, right, in essentially biblical Greek mythology, right? As Lupe just mentioned, right, like in AP, you get explicitly taught to use and learn and like reference biblical allusions. And yet, right, like that all of those biblical and Greek mythology allusions, like we see that as not as separate, as like that's simply intellectual, right? They're implicitly, sort of like just accepted as normal. They're distinguished from the religious or the spiritual. They're just considered meaningful and worthwhile, right? That happens non-controversially in schools because not just because of those discrete pieces of knowledge, but because the systems of thought behind them, right? The systems of thought, the ideas, the broader like categories of ideas, right, are wrapped up, not just in faith traditions, but actually as part of what Tawahi Smith calls like the Western cultural archive, right? They're accepted without challenge with hypocrisy, as we're seeing right now, because they reflect the West, the construction, the intellectual construction of the West, in contrast to the global South, right? And this Eurocentric 0 point, the idea that culture starts and makes sense only with Europe at the center. And so that biblical and Greek mythology, biblical and Greek and Roman like stories, those aren't religious, those aren't questionable because they're just normal. They're at the 0 point. And we're going to come back to that in a second. But that's where this starts because our curriculum has been like assailed on these grounds of like religion, separation of church and state. Like what we're talking about isn't religious in a Western sense at all, right? These ideas like are different, right? And what we were talking about is that the things that we're seeing, this attack and saying like, oh, like this is church and state, like these are religious concepts. It's like, no, these are attacks on a different way of thinking the world. And if we can click the next for the animation to come up. So I want to frame this for you a little bit in two ways. In one way, like in one way, like this is about, right, like how we live these things in our classrooms, right? So how we understand why these are core practices in our own pedagogy and praxis. And on the other hand, how we explain and defend why the inclusion of these practices is so important for students and parents. And we often tend to think about it in the terms of that second piece, but I also want us to think about it about the why for ourselves, because that's super important, like that we're accountable not just to ethnic studies as a set of discrete facts, but ethnic studies, right, as something deeper. And so that we can defend and make strong arguments in support of this work. As we can go to the next slide. Now, like actuarially, in an actuarial sense, right, like in Lak'ech, right, like the in Lak'ech poem we all know and look at and think about, actually comes from a longer Luis Valdez poem, Pensamiento Sorbiento, right? Which covers a lot of terrain, right? And that poem is super important. It's super important. But what's significant about it isn't just that it's a poem and that it's by Luis Valdez, who is awesome, but it is because what Luis Valdez was doing in that poem, as the title says, pensamiento serpiento, right? Serpent thinking. What he was doing was trying to capture, in using the Quichua Mayan in Lak'ech poem, he was trying to capture the different way of thinking that Chicanos, that Raza, right, experience in the world. And that ties into a historic pattern of thought and culture and cultural thought that existed in pre-colonial times, carried on and continued to shape cultural ways of being, questions of relationality, as Chicanos sort of spread and grew up in East LA and across California and across the Southwest. And so the point here is that, right, like ethnic studies isn't just particular histories. It isn't just particular poems. It isn't just that this is a piece of pensamiento serpiento, right, which is important, right, to say that, like, no, this isn't religious, but it's a piece of this poem. But if we understand ethnic studies as actually examining the study of race, identity, and power, right, as that broader question, right, then we can understand that anything we do isn't about the discrete pieces of information. It's not just about this discrete poem, but it's opportunities and insights into the perspectives and life ways of historically marginalized communities, and opportunities to, like, reflect on the wisdom and medicine that they can give to our lives, right? And this isn't like a foreign task to schools, right? Like we just talked about, our curriculum's flooded with allusions to Greek and Roman mythology, to Judeo-Christian mythologies, right, to the intellectual heritage of, again, that Western cultural archive. We're drawn back to, like, that Eurocentric 0 point, not so much by the facts, right, but by the fact that our curriculum, our schools, our institutions, they ask us to think the world in those terms. They ask us to think about relationality based on the terms of relationality that are prescribed in all this stuff, right? And so ethnic studies then is about just exploring different ontologies and epistemologies from marginalized communities. What ontology and epistemology are, these seem like they're, of course, big words, but they're important to know and understand, because this is the kind of stuff that allows us both to understand what we are doing ourselves and to push back when people critique us in the ways that we know they will, right? Ontology is our understanding of what counts as reality, how we, like, understand our own nature of being in the world, how we relate to one another, to the land, right, to the world around us. Epistemology is understanding what counts as knowledge, how it's acquired, how we understand and, like, know what we know as true, and how we value knowledge in the world. We can go to the next slide. And so what all this comes down to is kind of understanding that, like, different communities have different intellectual heritages. In Lak'ech, Pensamiento Serpiento was an invitation to think about the world differently and to engage and appreciate the ways that we think about the world, to see, like, oh, wait, that is how I think about things different. Like, recognize that can show up in the contents of our classrooms, in literature, in histories. And what so essentially, right, we can imagine, right, these different heritages, like, and imagine our relationality and engagement in the world differently, in ways that, like, shape and have been shaped by interactions and systems and structures of power over time, right? And so in simple terms, right, essentially this means that ethnic studies we're not just looking at the texts and stories, right? When we talk about these terms that we're talking about today, in Lak'ech, Ubuntu, Kapwa, right? Like, we're not just talking about those as sort of discrete facts, but we're talking about the deeper things they speak to, right? In this idea, which many of us have probably seen, of, like, the cultural iceberg, right? Ethnic studies is getting at the stuff underneath the surface, right? It's not just, oh, like, we added you into the history book, you're fine now. No, we want more than that. Ethnic studies wants more than that. We want to be able to explore our values, right? Deeper beliefs, norms, notions of beauty, like, all of these things that are the deeper attitudes and understandings of how we engage in the world and how we engage with culture. And this is, again, from Homi Bhabha, right, who writes and kind of explains this. He says, it's not from those who it is from those who suffered the sentence of history, subjugation, domination, diaspora, displacement, that we learn our most enduring lessons for living and thinking. Understanding the effective experiences of social marginality as it emerges in non-canonical forms, right, transforms our critical strategies. It forces us to confront the concept of culture outside of objects to art, right? To engage with culture as an uneven, incomplete production of meaning and value. And so as we think about like, what are we trying to do with our students in an ethnic studies classroom? It's that we're trying to get them to do that process. Whether our students are students of color or our students are white students, they're coming from, unfortunately, that Western cultural archive. And our ethnic studies classes are invitations to get them to step into and appreciate, right, the ways of thinking the world that come from historically marginalized communities, and how thinking the world differently in different terms actually helps us get beyond that cultural archive to humanize one another, to decolonize. We can go to the next slide. And so essentially, when we do that well, when we're thoughtful about trying to get into the deeper parts here, right, what it does is it helps us produce new relationalities, and like relationalities, ways of interacting and seeing and appreciating one another that take us beyond colonization. So if we return now a little bit to the concepts we're diving into, right, and specifically that we're going to talk about here in a second, right, in Lak'ech, the Nawiolin, the Ashe, the Ubuntu, Isang Bagsak, the Kapwa, right, those invite us into, for brief spaces that our students are in our classrooms, to think the world differently, to like basically be immersed in a different ontology and a way of relating to others, to the land, right? And they allow us to actually humanize those perspectives for all of our students, to begin to understand those as normal, as meaningful, as intelligible. And so when we're able to engage with, like, to live for some time in the worldviews of others, right, then like Baba said, right, the effective experience of the marginalized helps us see and humanize, to the benefit of all of us, right, other people. And when we convey that to our students and convey that to our parents and our communities, that's not a religious appeal, right, in part because those concepts come from places where religion, as the West sees and understands it and constructs it, doesn't exist. But it's an academic opportunity to actually grow our appreciation for an understanding of the world and others, and actually to like the illusions, right, the cultural illusions, to grow that like cultural archive to be one that focuses not just on the West, but actually on the global South. And so to bring us to a decolonized global South cultural archive, so these other ways of seeing and being in the world are appreciated. And go to the next slide. And so I'm going to go wrap up here with sort of just a connection to pedagogy I've sort of like held with me as really important since I started as an ESL teacher. And just a lesson conveyed to me, and many of us may have heard this before, right? Like that, like language not understood is just noise. When we're talking in second language and multilingual context, language not understood is just noise. And I want to extend that to our work here, right? And sort of note that like practices without context, right, end up being just noise. And I'll include, sort of frame that with this quote by Louis Malle, who was like reflecting here on his engagement with Eastern philosophy when he was like in Vietnam. And then he came back from Vietnam and he found that, as it says, I lost interest. I cannot build any motivation to join them. The words lacked meaning in this new social context. And of course, I could not appeal to the text to make meaning, for I could read, but I never learned how to understand. And this is super important. And in a lot of ways, it's the core of what I want to make sure we're thinking about as we engage with these topics today, is really appreciating the core of what they mean, the ontological, epistemological message that they're trying to get us to do. In Lak'ech is not just a thing that I read at the start of my classroom and magically changes my students' lives and that we move on from, right? Ubuntu is not just a thing that I say or use as like, oh, yes, I care about this, and becomes almost like corporate DEI speak, right? We have to think about, are we making sure that our students are engaging with this stuff, that these are invitations into the deeper, the ontologies that we're exploring, the understandings of the different ways of being in the world, and invitations to help us start to decolonize. And so, right, I'll leave us with these like sort of reflection questions. How am I ensuring that the use of whichever of the many we're using in our classrooms are a meaningful practice in our classroom? They're not just noise, but they're a meaningful practice. And how does the introduction of In Lak'ech, the Nawiolin, the Ashe, right? Like, how do they invite different ways of seeing and being into the classroom? How are different cultural ways of thinking the world explored transparently in my classroom? And how am I talking about that, right? Showing that, because that's the ethnic studies of it, right? How am I modeling and sharing different ways of relationality? How am I modeling and sharing different ways of relating to and thinking about the land? And how are students asked to consider different intellectual practices and traditions? And finally, right, like, how is my content offering students a new cultural archive to draw from? So that when they think stories in their head, they're not thinking, right, Joseph Smith and the hero's journey or their Greek whatever, right? But rather, right, they are thinking these stories, our stories, the stories from their communities, their heritages in the global South. That's my time. Thank you all very much. Yeah, happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Michael. I think we're going to take a short break right now, but I think you'll all join me in thanking our LESMC faculty who presented this morning. Michael Dominguez, who's a professor at Cal State Dominguez Hills, Samia Showman, who works for San Mateo County Office of Education, Memo and Ricky from San Diego, who work for teaching ethnic studies there, and then so many others who we're going to see this afternoon. All of these folks make up our wonderful team of ethnic studies folks. We're going to take a short break now, a little cafecito and a stretch. We'll come back at what time, Lupe? At 11? Or do you want to come back at 10:55?
I think we can come back at 11. I'll go ahead and play music. When the music turns off, that means come back. So get your stretch on, get your break, take care of yourself, and we'll see you at exactly 11 o'clock.
In the year 1970, in the city of San Diego, under the Coronado Bridge, lied a little piece of land. A piece of land that the community of Logan Heights wanted to make into a park. A park where all the chavalitos could come and play in, so they wouldn't have to play in the street anymore and get run over by a car. A park where all the viejitos could come and just sit down and watch the sun go down in the tarde. A park where all the familias could come and just get together on a Sunday afternoon and celebrate the spirit of life itself. But the city of San Diego said, chale, we're gonna make a highway patrol substation here, man. So on April the 22nd, 1970, La Raza of Logan Heights and other Chicano communities of San Diego got together and they organized and they walked on the land and they took it over with their picks and their shovels and they began to build their park. And today, that little piece of land under the Coronado Bridge is known to everybody as Chicano Park. It began in 1970 under the Coronado Bridge en mi barrio in San Diego, where my people began to fight for Chicano Park, for Chicano Park. Under the bridge, under the bridge, under the bridge. my brother. We shall continue to fight, my friend, for Chicano Park under the bridge. For Chicano Park under the bridge. Continue to live, my brother. We shall continue to fight, my friend. We shall continue to live, my brother. We shall continue to fight, my friend, for Chicano Park under the bridge. For Chicano Park under the bridge. Que vivan, raza, los barrios unidos, raza, 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 que vivan, los barrios unidos, raza, que vivan, raza, los barrios unidos, raza, que vivan, Blue skies, brown this much feels like a parade. My neighbor and her children came. No one could stay away. Rest on the green lawn. Agua fresca. Yellow corn, oh no stormtroopers in a uniform. I
Welcome back, everybody. The rest of our session is going to be as powerful and as informational as what you heard this morning. I'm going to start by introducing our colleague, our comrade, Art Nelson Concordia, who is the lead ethnic studies person in Santa Barbara, who's going to introduce the idea and concept and reality of Isang Bagsak and Kapwa. Art?
Wow. Good morning, everyone. Magandang umaga, buenos dias to everyone here. What a morning it's been. Once again, Art Nelson Concordia. And I want to start off by pointing out the fabric behind the text. And that is what we in the Philippines call a malong. And you can't tell, but that fabric is tubular, it's circular, it's connected. And I have a bunch of them in the house. And here's one right here. So like on one end, like it's a rectangle, but it's also, since it is tubular and connected, you can open it up. And it's this multi-purpose piece, right? That I've used to carry my babies, that people use to carry any sort of item, fruits, vegetables from harvest, it's a head wrap, it's a sleeping bag, it's super utility. But what I want to really reference it as is as a metaphor for these concepts, Isang Bagsak and Kapwa. So if we can advance the slide, if we think of, and I think Isang Bagsak has become popularized in some segments of our education community, right? But for those who of us here, it's new to, it literally translates to one down in Tagalog. And Tagalog is one of the many languages of the archipelago, right? The collection of islands that makes the Philippines. But if we can advance the slide, here's the context. And I think this is super important and connected to what Michael was talking about, that this term, this concept is just noise if it's detached from its purpose and from its origin. And this ritual really is a practice that represents unity in action of common cause. And so how it goes is somebody, an organizer, somebody in the room of people on the streets with people who are engaged in some action for justice. Someone, and as it's wrapping up, someone might yell out, Isang Bagsak, and everybody will clap or stomp or yay, but in unison. This is always weird virtually, but you'll get the point. So when you hear me say Isang Bagsak, and I think the easier way is everybody just get ready, hands up, right? You ready? Isang Bagsak. And imagine a group of 10 in a room, 35 students in a room, 500 students in a lecture hall, or 150,000 on the streets. That represents a coming together of people who are in common cause for some larger purpose. So Isang Bagsak is one of the fibers of this fabric, if we could advance the slide, that really is connected to an ancient and indigenous, question here. So martial law, this period in the Philippines where this dictator, Ferdinand Marcos, basically controlled the nation by decree. He's a fascist. And so millions of people organized in opposition, right, to this undemocratic figure. If we can advance a slide, please. Isang Bagsak really is connected to this larger sense of being. So this term or concept Kapwa, if we could advance a couple of times, to use another metaphor, right? Or the same metaphor, the weaving, like these homes, these are indigenous homes. They're called Bahay Kubo or Nipa huts. And if you look closely, like everything is woven together from the roof to the walls to the bamboo structure, everything is woven together. And these structures are ancient structures. They can withstand hurricanes and typhoons and incredible storms, because the bamboo itself also is very metaphorical of the people, flexible yet very strong and much stronger together, okay? And so Kapwa really is our sense of who we are in relation to others. And it is so incredibly, I think, if you pan back from the Philippines and look at our globe, you really see, right, indigenous people's knowledge and wisdom in terms of our understandings that we cannot, no one stands alone, that we are part of a fabric, that we are much, much stronger together. And what the reality is that this kapwa, or this fabric, right, there's two really important questions for us to consider if we could advance. If we advance there's two questions. So critical question one, right? What keeps the fabric or the kapwa together? What strengthens and maintains it? I think is a great kind of generative question for us to consider within our practice as educators. When we talk about community, when we talk about you are my other me, when we talk about interrelatedness and connection, like we know what strengthens and maintains strong community. And we also have experienced, unfortunately, the second question, right? What are the things that break us apart, that tatter our fabrics? So question two after question one. And then we could advance to the next slide, right? What breaks down the fabric, the togetherness of the people, what threatens and weakens it? These things are structural. Like if, as ethnic studies practitioners, we have to go to the systems and we have to consider all of these things. And so if you can advance real quick, so this is what's called a banig, like 3 examples of banig. And building on the metaphor, and we could keep going. And what you'll see is that each banig is kind of like, on top of each banig is an example of people power. Like Filipinos, they will take to the streets in millions, really as a living embodiment of the concept of Kapwa. Whenever there's this dictatorial fascist president who comes in really representing colonialism and imperialism, it's a threat to the fabric, to the Kapwa. And like Philippines, imagine Isang Bagsak being called out, and it's a deafening roar, right, of unity representative of this. Let's keep going. I got 2 more minutes. So when we talk about Isang Bagsak, when we talk about Kapwa, to just close us off on the metaphor, and this is also, I think, appropriate. This image is a beautiful image, and it's held by Getty. So I found like a bootleg version because I didn't want to pay $500 to use this image of a Kalinga weaver. Kalinga is part of the northern part of the Philippines, and they're master weavers all throughout the archipelago, right? So anyway, I wanted to point that out. But ethnic studies, Isang Bagsak, Kapwa, and in Lak'ech really are the we, right? And if I could leave you with this thought, if we could advance one more time, right? We, each of us, right, are the fibers that hold our familias, our comunidad, right? Our tao, which is the word for people in the Philippines, one of the languages, or a dozen of the languages, our collective personhood together. And sorry, one more advance. Ethnic studies, Kapwa in Lak'ech. If we could see our work, right, the work that we do collectively to repair, to heal, to reclaim, to liberate, and to build a just and sustainable and holistically well world, like that is to me, that is all of our relations. That is at the root of our indigenous knowledge and wisdom, our epistemologies and ontologies that will guide us to think differently, because we can't think that we're going to keep doing the same as we've been doing, right? Really led by these dominant systems, and think that we will continue to exist much longer in the face of this climate catastrophe. So much on the line. Please reach out around questions of Isang Bagsak, Kapwa, and in Lak'ech, and looking forward to the many other connections that our presenters will provide. So let's close this portion out with a collective, get the hands ready. Isang Bagsak. All right, y'all.
Thank you, Art. The Kapwa, the fabric of our humanity and solidarity. We're going to move now to Dindi Katanga, another one of our fabulous faculty, who's going to talk about the Ubuntu. Dindi?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Such an honor to be here. My name is Dindi, part of LESMC, do work on the Black Studies end of it. And in another life, I'm a science teacher, also teach at the university, do a lot of work on like Black feminism and all of these types of things. The reason I'm saying that is actually today has been one of the more humanizing kind of experiences for me personally, as someone who does a lot of presenting and speaking and thinking about some of these things. And I think that the case has been that I'm here with my comrades and co-conspirators, and we're talking about ourselves in ways that are very personal, but that are also incredibly like political, outside of the ways that Western academic, Eurocentric ways, even within our own like kind of thing, make us do. So I'm very happy to do that. I'm so glad that Art Nelson brought out this fabric, because I just went and I pulled one off my shelf as well. So the background of what I'm about to share in the next like 3 minutes or so is what ours are called they're kangas or lesos or kitenges, or there are many names for them. And what they are, they tend to be kind of a floral, have so many, kind of like that. They tend to have a message written at the bottom, words of wisdom. This particular one is, I find joy in myself and my family. And so they tend to be sentiments that are like that. Some are more decorative. This is my standard like head wrap, like sleep in it one, but it's also a great celebration to know that we all have our own kind of fabrics and ways of thinking about these things. So thank you. Next one. Okay, so Ubuntu, and I do want to honor Dr. Guillermo, who had to leave, for how he uses it in his classroom, is many things. It's a philosophy, it's a provocation, it is an affirmation, it is a way of life, it is epistemology, as somebody just said, a way of knowing. It is also ontological, a way of understanding ourselves as real beings. So what Ubuntu is this notion of I am because we are, or you become a human through other human beings. And it is, like I'm saying on this slide, this sense of a mutual recognition. It is kind of a philosophical outlook that comes out of South and East Africa. And so the idea here is always to evoke a collective responsibility, a sense of how we redistribute resources, because I also want to emphasize these are not just vibes or feelings. This is also like how we actually manage our lives, how we decide how to manage our resources. And as everyone has said before, this is a philosophical orientation that predates our colonization, predates all of these kind of system of domination that have prevailed and really kind of show our people as being resilient and what have you. The other thing is before I go to the next one, there's always a conversation about, do you get to suspend who you are within this collective we? And the way I understand Ubuntu, and many of the scholars that I think about, and not just scholars, just ordinary people just practicing for thousands of years, means that it is a way to eschew individualism while maintaining the creativity energies of what it means to be an individual. So not goodbye to individualism, but yes to individuality and creative expression. Next one, please. And then very quickly with this one, I happen to come from East Africa, from Kenya. So I speak Kiswahili, which is the first language on the top. I'm also indigenous Kamba, which is the last language at the bottom. And so what it is, Ubuntu is a philosophical orientation that comes out of this region that's covered in blue. And the Bantu peoples, it's a language group. It's a little complicated, and actually, I think anthropologically, how they think about how to like categorize languages has problems. We don't have time for that. But in the same way that English is in a group of languages called West Germanic, Bantu is a whole group of languages that cover this region. And what it is our word for person and people is the same and has been the same, has not changed for a long time. So it's probably a kind of survivalism that we've managed to maintain, meaning I can go to Namibia. I don't know the languages spoken there, but the word for person, personhood, personality, those type of words are all the same and don't seem to have changed. And so the word behind Ubuntu is very powerful for that reason. It literally that NTU means person or people for about half of the people who are in this region in Africa. Next one, please. And then I want to end by relating this idea of Ubuntu to what our friends before us have said with Lak'ech, with Ashe that's coming up, with all of these kind of ways of understanding our collectivity. That non-Western knowledge paradigms to kind of just beyond this idea of collectivity, being who you are through other people, is that knowledge is kind of understood in different ways among us, and that we haven't lost this. So I'm not going to read each of these, but knowledge is communal, again, not very individualized. We're thinking about it in holistic ways. There's not a strict separation between how people understand themselves as spiritual beings and physical beings in the world. And that's why, like, when these lawsuits and when people fight us, it's a very interesting thing. It tells me you are not together or full as a human being in the way you understand yourself, because we're expressing our way of being together without imposing ourselves on you. And your takeaway is this is a religious imposition. So that's really interesting. It's a completely different paradigm. And I did want to emphasize that before I leave. Something else that I think you might find some commonality here. I'm not saying that we're all the same, but I do think that there's something within non-Western paradigms worth thinking about here is this idea that maybe hierarchy is not who has so much of material goods or certain type of fames. That hierarchy really, at least in our communities, comes down to age, but not just age in that way. Who has the most knowledge, the deeper wisdom? That's kind of who we defer to, not just who has more money, who's more kind of attractive in more conventional ways. And I think there's something there for us to get back to. The other thing is this idea of not just the written word. And I think there are a lot of implications here for the classroom. If we can tap into all sorts of ways that young people express themselves outside of writing, these spoken word, like the videos we've seen here, very powerful, all sorts of forms of oration, art, everything should also have the same kind of be as equally important. And so Guillermo did talk about how Ubuntu is being used in his classroom. Like I said, I run a tiny, small kind of democratic school, and we use Ubuntu in the everyday sense. So we'll say, let's practice Ubuntu as we do something. And then we also ask students to think deeply kind of on those philosophical terms when it comes to our study of history. So I'm here trying to say that maybe this is a way in which we can subvert white supremacist culture and kind of a capitalist domination. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Dindi. And then I'll move it on to Lupe for the Ashe.
Hello and good morning, everyone. I'm going to be presenting on behalf of someone who is like family to us, Juan Carlos Blanco of Omoache Cuban Cultural Dance. And so the only reason why he wasn't here, he wanted to be here, is because they're actually closing today a performance in San Diego. And so this right here is Juan Carlos Blanco being presented with an award for what he does to keep the Afro-Cuban Yoruba-based culture and dance alive here in San Diego. And so here is another little graphic so that you can get a feel of Omoache and the work that they do. And you're welcome to also go onto their website and learn about when they present their courses, their drumming, their dance lessons, and currently, because of the situation that we're in, they are doing some classes on Zoom. So I'll go ahead and share that information with folks. And so I asked him, will you present a little bit about what Ashe means to you? And he said, absolutely. He goes, that's even in our name. that's the name of his group. And so here's a short clip of him talking about what Ashe means to him.
Hi, my name is Juan Carlos. I'm the director of the company, of a Cuban dance company, Ashe. I'm here today to talk about Ashe. What is Ashe mean for us, for Cuban people, and for many, many other people around the world. Ashe is when I decide good for you. Ashe is when I receive good from life. I would say Ashe because I have good health. I would say Ashe because I have a house to live. I would say Ashe because I have good friends. So Ashe defines the good thing in life, the blessing that we have in life. The name of my company, Ashe. Omo means child, and Ashe, good fortune or blessing, good blessing. When I named a company Ashe, I was thinking about the child around the world that need to understand and learn about culture and people around the world. Ashe for us is so important because in the daily life, when we talk to each other and we want support people, or we want to give good energy to people, we always use the word Ashe. Oh, don't worry about this, don't worry about that. Ashe. Because that's the way that we decide, or we give the best energy to one, from one to another. I say Ashe is part of our life. Ashe is everything that we receive in life, good thing that we receive in life. That's Ashe. When we talk about good thing that people do for us, when we talk about good thing that happen in life to us, when we're talking about good thing that we want to do to another, that's Ashe. Because Ashe is a blessing. It's the best thing that we can give one to another. So for that, for many other things, I will say to you, Ashe, Ashe, Ashe.
And so he wanted me to share a little bit more about what Omoache is. and so that we can connect it to today's presentation. Omoache performances include the representation of Cuba's 3 most influential African cultures, the Yoruba from Nigeria, the Arara, the present-day Benin and Togo, the Congo from Bantu-speaking nations of present-day Angola region, and Franco-Haitian, also Bantu-speaking nations of present-day Angola region via Haiti. Each of these African cultures has its own distinct language, style of expression, religion, and cultural identity. And Ashe is something that is shared amongst them all. And so lastly, before I close up his presentation, I wanted to share that there were 3 really interesting articles that came out in the San Diego Tribune just yesterday. And I have a clip. I'm going to share 2 quick little clips from one that was written by 3 Are Los Angeles members, one of which is also a liberated ethnic studies faculty, Guillermo Gomez, also Don Miller, and Alejandra Canan. So here's the first one. Similarly, Ashe, a Yoruba concept, evokes positive action in our educational spaces. It encourages our students to recognize the power they hold to manifest positive change within themselves and the world. It is a reminder to the youth that our word is our bond, and thus what we say must be wise because it carries weight and intention. Ashe invites all of us to reflect on the legacy of our ancestors and decide how we will carry on the work to create the conditions that benefit all of humanity. And then I took another clip because I felt that it would tie very, very closely as well. Amid a larger societal context of growing violence and division, with parents and communities calling desperately for the safety of schools and our children, we must in fact center the concepts of Lak'ech and Ashe as the guiding principles that will help us to build the evolved school communities that all of our students and families deserve. And with that, I will go ahead and pass it on. Ashe.
Ashe, Lupe. We'll pass it on to Cynthia Rodriguez, who will introduce our panel.
Okay, let's see. I hope I have everything right here. Am I on?
You're on.
Okay, good, because I can't see myself, but it's all right. Yes, I'm working with about several dozen Maya scholars. One of them has already written a piece that you'll be able to see in a little bit, and that's by Norberto, or he goes by Luca, and he will explain it. Initially, I was going to present myself, but I thought, this is like a once in a, well, you're not gonna see this often. That is, we have always depended upon Luis Valdez since the early 70s, Pensamiento Serpentino, for how we understand the concepts and that serpentine philosophy. I moved to the Yucatan for a year and a half, or 15 months, about 4 or 5 years ago. And I came across some scholars, elders, educators that I had known a few of them who had come to Arizona, and one of them is Norberto, who will be joining us in a second. I think I got a note, he might be on here already. I don't know. But anyway, because of this conflict, right now, there's 5 Maya scholars that are working on presenting the concept of Maya philosophy. Norberto, or Luca, he is an educator. In fact, he used to be my professor at where he taught in Valladolid. I think it goes by Saki, if I'm not mistaken, the city. Anyway, do we know if he's here already? Because like I said, I can do a whole thing myself. But
Luca is here. Yes, he is.
Okay, perfect. Bueno, mira, Norberto, gracias que estás aquí. Y le estaba diciendo que yo puedo presentar, pero aquí hoy es mejor que tú presentes, porque, bueno, como digo, no creo que han escuchado el concepto y la filosofía maya de un maya. Entonces, Luca o Norberto viene de Quintana Roo, Entonces, si estás aquí, pues puedes empezar. Norberto, Luca.
Where is he? Where did he go?
No sé si está.
Aquí está.
¿Estás ahí, Norberto? O quizás estás en silencio.
Yes, he's here. He is muted. I'm asking him to unmute. It might be because he's in Mexico. There might be like a lag or something.
Okay, well, look, I'm going to continue then until he comes on, okay?
Yes.
Sí, entonces, Norberto, si me escuchas, cuando tú estés listo, tú nos dices y después tú empiezas. I took a few notes. My interest in this is I remember when Luis Valdez wrote this in 1973, Pensamiento Serpentino. And a lot of us knew it. I don't think it was as big as it is now, in the sense that I think a lot of us thought it was awesome. And I remember knowing it as, tú eres mi otro yo, you are my other self. I think when it got translated, it came out as, you are my other me. But that's what I remember from way back. Pero one of the things that, when I started collaborating with educators from Tucson, and I remember that concept that they were teaching, and so I remember Luis. Anyway, so what I did is I began to research, like, where did Luis get his information from? And it turns out that, of course, it's a Maya concept. And in one specific Maya professor was named Domingo Martinez Paredes, who was a native speaker. His mother was a curandera. He was a linguist and a philologist. So he was in the position to know the meaning of words, et cetera, et cetera. So in this process, I read 9 of his books, and I think that's how many he wrote. They're super hard to find. But in any case, I read all of that, and I ended up writing something after I left the Yucatan. Well, I think I was still there. But anyway, so you'll be able to see that. If anybody wants that, you can request it. And I know I have it in Spanish also, because I send it to the educators from the Yucatan. But it's called Ishim, a Maiz-based philosophy. Now, let me do a quick check. Norberto, ¿ya estás? Probably not. Okay. So
he's here, but he's not unmuting. I'm not sure if he's having technical difficulties on his end.
Or you know what it is? It might simply be he's on the phone. You know what I mean? Like, but unable to sign on yet, or because he's doing something anyway. But let me, if we can switch to the thing I sent you, and then we can come back to his as soon as he comes back. Yeah, I was hoping we didn't have to do this because I'd rather have everyone listen to him. But I mean, I think I did a pretty good job, if you ask me. What it is 9 books, and one specific book is on the Maya language itself. It's a linguistic book, and I mean, it is super complex. It's awesome. Anyway, that's still not mine, right? Or is that? Is that mine?
Roberto, you wanted your slides that you emailed us?
Yes. No,
So just
I mean,
go back to where you were, Lupe.
No, that's Norberto's slides. I think Lupe
So
was gonna
go back, Lupe.
No, this is what he asked for us to put on slides. It's the text that he sent us.
Okay, you know what? I'll just use my book, okay? I'll be very brief. Okay, so, and again, well, okay, so in Lak'ech, of course, we know, I think most everybody knows, everyone has a general idea what it is. Norberto will explain it a little bit better. But the second concept is Pancheve. And I think the educators at Raza Studies in Tucson would use that concept. Pancheve is very basic. It's to seek the root of the truth. and I have about 30 concepts, and then there's 30 more, but I'm not going to go through all of them for the obvious reasons. The one that I really think that is very, at least in my opinion, very indicative or something that's emblematic, symbolic of Maya culture is the concept of zero. And the concept of zero is called Helmen. And it's not, the concept of zero for the Maya is not the concept that the West has. For the West, the concept of zero is the absence of value. You know what? Lumpak just sent me a message. He's wanting to know when he's on. Okay, so I don't know how to handle that. Anyway, I don't know. I guess it looked like you might not be able to join us. Okay, okay. So Helmen, the concept of zero, is again in the West, it's the absence of value, and for the Maya, it's the beginning of everything. So I think there's a similar Nawa concept, and that concept is Chinachli. It's similar. Pashil Kayala, or the Gran Signo Inicial, that was the beginning of where the count begins. You know, the long count. Again, I think that was 3114 BC. You know, Quetzalcoatl, I think most of us are used to thinking it's a word in Nahuatl, but if you actually look at it, that word is both Maya and Nahuatl. You know, the Quetzal is more related to the Maya people than the Nahuatl. Okay, so Quetzal would be the Maya part, the Coat would be the serpent. So it's both a Maya and Nahuatl concept. Serpent, of course, being Coat. Tamuanchan is a very special place, and I was wondering if people don't mind, give me like 15 seconds. Let me respond to him and tell him that we may have a problem. Okay, I don't know if that's gonna. Anyway, sorry about that. So Tamuanchan is kind of fascinating because I first came across the concept in the Nawa. You know, if you know the story of the creation story of the Nawa peoples, it takes place in Tamuanchan, and that's found in the Codex Chimalpopoca. Okay, now Tamuanchan also takes place, or rather, in the Popol Vuh, the creation stories also take place in Tamuanchan, which is kind of interesting for obvious reasons. The stories are different. You know, those of you that know the Nawa version, that's with. Let me see. Well, like I said, so the Nawa version is Tamuanchan. That's with the ants, you know, the red ant, the black ants, and all that. Anyway, and you can imagine I'm kind of a little shaken up because I thought that Roberto was going to speak. Okay, so another concept that is also found in both cultures, Masewal or Masewali, is again found in both the Maya and the Nawa. I remember a friend of mine from Belize said that that they thought maybe it does come from the Nawa, but they absolutely use it. They use Masewal for themselves, and they don't use Maya. They don't use the different terms. They said we just refer to ourselves as Masewal, and that means regular person. Now, you know, because I did my work on Maiz, my book, Our Sacred Maiz is Our Mother. You know, the word that most of the work was in Nawa, but in Maya, the word maiz is ishin, and shinte. And you could imagine, I probably pronounced everything wrong, Ishim or Shimte. Shimte means sacred maize. Ishim is just regular maize. Okay. Unapku, you know, most of these that I'm telling you were not taught at Raza Studies. I taught them in my classes, in my classrooms at the University of Arizona. We didn't have the supposed religious thing, you know. And even still, that is a very critical, it was explained very well a little while ago. In the West, you know, there is a break from astronomy, astrology, religion, philosophy. And from what I recall from the Maya, there's no, I mean, that's an artificial division. It's simply about a way of life, which really, I'm almost finished with the ones I have here. And then I'll explain that, yeah, I think it's been explained. I mean, it's a philosophy, you know, it's not, you know, the poem is a poem, but it's taken from a philosophy, and it's a living philosophy. A lot of times people try and say that they're wrong or that it means something else. Well, the Maya themselves and the scholars that I'm working with, you know, they affirm absolutely it is part of their living philosophy. Okay, so Unapku is a mathematical concept. A lot of people think it's God or translation for God, but at least and that was that Domingo Martinez guy, the linguist. He says that's not a God concept, it's a mathematical concept, you know, movement and measure. You know, a lot of times you hear people say, oh, you know, they just made that up. But no, again, it wasn't about God, it was a movement and measure. Now, the concept of men, which is Maya, Yucatec Maya, it's obviously not English, but men is the concept of creer, crear y hacer. Now, when I teach, especially, you know, youngsters, I always teach, use the analogy of like, if there's athletes in the audience, I explain to them as like, if you go into an arena or go into a gym and you see your opposition and you freak out like, oh my God, we're gonna lose, you know, they're much taller, etc. I said, if you think that way, that's what will happen. And so the concept of men is it's kind of like the opposite. That is the idea that if you want to do something, you can do it. You know, and I equate that with si se puede, same idea, you know. It's if you want to do something, you will be able to do it. Now, Kochi, that's education with a responsibility. That's what I thought, what I witnessed at Raza Studies in Tucson. Ed Beats is the concept of todo se paga. I was gonna say, I was wondering, I don't know what the time situation is now. Oh, I actually I do. I think Ed Beats is todo se paga. It's a similar, like the street term of what comes around goes around, you know, that there's no such thing as like, oh, I'm gonna do this because nobody will know. Well, the concept of Ed Beats, and again, I know I pronounce everything wrong, but it's that idea that nothing is secret, so to speak. Yalche Balche is an ecological concept. Let me see if I can read that. Yeah, mira, the death of the last tree signifies the death of the last human being. So again, it's a very ecological concept, thousands of years before the environmental movement. I think I'm just gonna leave you with two more. Niktek Katun is it marks when the Europeans showed up, you know. It's marking the arrival of the European, the end of the world as we knew it. And at that time, the era of freedom and independence ended for the Maya. This other concept is Iña Cuna. Now you hear that a lot of, I've read it in different Chicana or Chicano publications. They use the word amor y dolor all as one word, but it comes from this, from Iña Cuna. Yeah, so Iña Cuna, what that means, well, I gave the translation, amor y dolor, that love cannot exist without pain. or vice versa. And I'll stop right there and explain about this philosophy. That is, in 1492, people from across the ocean came with the idea that they came across people that were not human. Of course, even when in 1519, when they actually ended up at the in the Americas, what is now Mexico, same thing. They thought these people are not human. If anything, they are less than human or not human at all. And so imagine that the knowledge that people had here, if they said, well, they're not human, they're less than human, that must mean it's less valid. It doesn't count. In fact, they went a little further. They thought it was literally demonic. Now, I can tell you from Tucson and the California thing right now, that the thing that was signed, that agreement, it's based on the same idea, that the Maya are part of the Aztec religion, and the Aztec religion is demonic, human sacrifice, cannibalism, on and on and on. That was exactly the same thing in Tucson. The problem is twofold. Number one, the Maya are not Aztec, the Maya are the Maya. So imagine if a scholar says that, which tells you something about their experts, etc. But the bigger problem is that they have demonized the Aztec religion, what they call the Aztec religion. Every culture in the world has their own way of looking at the world. And only an arrogant culture would rise up and claim that they're the ones that are right and everybody else is wrong. And that's precisely what has happened. That is, they came with the idea that everybody here was demonic and the knowledge was demonic, and therefore it had to be destroyed, etc. And I submit that nothing has changed in terms of that mindset from 1492 and 1519 to the present. I think some of you who know me know that I work a lot with issues of police and police violence, killings and all that. Ask me what the cause is. It's exactly that. They see us, anybody who's not white, not European, they see us as less than human. Now, let me, because again, I'm not sure what the time is situation here, but let me see. Got my mind went. Give me a second. Oh, okay. So here's the important part. As I said, I've been collaborating with, and actually some of us here, I know Lupe knows, Norberto, and a few other people. That is, we have an opportunity to take something that was but a poem into an actual collaboration with living peoples, living cultures, And I think that's a step even beyond what we've all been doing. Because I think what we've been doing and what we've done, when I lived in they asked me, why do people in the US want to know about us? Why do they want to know about our culture? And I explained, etc. And I think I wanted to ask them, I said, why don't you do part 2 to my book, my ace book, Or I'm going to do a part 2, maybe you could be part of it. And I said, no, after being there, listening and going to the conferences and on, listening to elders, the milpa, and on, it was like, no, what we need is not a part 2, we need a part 1. And that's what they're working on right now. And they were telling me that now what they're developing is that philosophy that they can teach their own students. So I think, and they're more than happy to collaborate with us, in the US. I'm in Mexico myself, but they're more than happy. And I think it'll be awesome because again, I don't think, it's a living culture. It's not frozen, and things change. And I think the most important thing I could leave you with is my friend from Belize. I remember telling him I was studying the what's it called, the Popol Vuh. A lot of people were saying, oh, you know what, the Popol Vuh is just written by Christians, that they translated everything wrong, made it fit into the Christian theology, etc. And so I went, and I went to my friend, and I asked him, I said, I go, I've been reading critiques of the Popol Vuh, and it says that it's really more Christian than anything. And so my friend says, you know what? It doesn't matter what anybody thinks. If they believe that, let them believe it. On our end, it is ours and it works for us, and that's all that matters, And I think for what I've seen, it says that he just came on. ¿Puedes hablar? Norberto, ¿estás ahí? I don't know if he's being let in or whatever. ¿Estás ahí, Norberto? Quizás estás en silencio.
He's been on for like 20 minutes, but I think he's having technical difficulties. We've asked him to unmute and he's unable to.
Yeah. Yeah, God, I'm totally sorry about that. We're gonna have to figure
Sí,
out
don
that.
Roberto, ya estoy aquí.
Mira, disculpa.
Don Roberto, ya estoy.
Sí, no sé cuánto tiempo te van a dar porque yo sé que pues, estábamos listos hace 20 minutos. Mira, si puedes, ¿le pueden dar tiempo? Lupe, if you can hear me, maybe you can put his slides on.
Sure.
Bueno, mira, Norberto, puedes empezar. Ahorita te van a poner tu presentación. Ahí estás.
Sí, muy bien. Que le den para que avance. Next.
Next.
Bueno, en la filosofía del pueblo maya es una filosofía de vida que buscamos entre esto la armonía, el hombre, naturaleza y el cosmos. 3 elementos esenciales para la existencia del hombre. En esta búsqueda de la armonía, estamos en tiempos difíciles, lo sabemos. Si vemos en esta parte de árbol, donde tenemos ahí en esa imagen el sol, el árbol, el eje de la vida, hay unos que se llaman los cargadores del tiempo, los captunes, que son los encargados de armonizar cada ciclo. Se cerró un ciclo, estamos en el 6º sol, hay hasta el 2026 habremos, si llegamos al 2026, habremos librado muchas cosas. Entonces, esta búsqueda de armonía nos da sentido a lo que es la filosofía. La que sigue. Entonces, en una práctica social del lenguaje, una práctica real, los mayas, aún los mayas de hoy, porque hay los mayas del ayer, los mayas de hoy, los mayas del mañana, usamos esta frase de saludo, Bishabel Inlak. En va implícito, es de Inlak, Ech Alaken. Tú eres yo soy tú. Entonces, esta frase es muy profunda, es del pueblo maya, no es de otro lugar. Entonces, analicemos qué significa esta palabra que ustedes pues están enfrentando un problema con el Estado o del Estado. Entonces, tendríamos que saber qué significa esta frase. La siguiente. Entonces, ahí viene un análisis lingüístico. Se tiene que descomponer estos elementos gramaticales para saber qué significa. Entonces, donde in significa mío, es posesivo, pronombre posesivo. Donde en lag, igual la siguiente palabra es lag, que tiene 3 acepciones, 3 formas de aceptarse, que es el otro, el otro, hermano de sangre, hermano de cultura. Eso nos da sentido. Y el ech, que significa un sufijo nominal que marca la persona que es tú. Entonces, el Lak'ech quiere decir entonces mi otro yo. Y se complementa con el otro que alak, donde tenemos que a significa el pronombre personal tú, lak, lo que habíamos dicho, con anterioridad, que es el otro, junto y hermano. Y se va formando entonces con ese sufijo nominal de primera persona, el en, que soy yo. Adelante, ese es un análisis lingüístico de la composición de la frase in Lak'ech a Lak'en. La interpretación de la primera frase in Lak'ech, que se traduce de manera literal, mi otro como tú. O sea, otro como tú significa tú eres como yo. Interpretar, tú eres mi otro yo. De esa manera filosófica decimos eso en los saludos a diario, donde nos encontramos, decimos esa frase, o sea, esa frase que ustedes que han retomado, que es muy profundo, nos lleva a creo que hay un problema. Seguimos ahí. Seguimos ahí.
Sí.
Se volvió muy oscura mi pantalla, ya no veo nada. Entonces, algo está.
Si quieres, ¿quieres que lo lea lo que está enfrente?
Sí, léelo porque no tengo nada y ya lo explico.
Dice, esta idea filosófica lo tenemos desde antes de la llegada de los colonizadores europeos. Ellos nos quisieron arrebatar y eliminar nuestra filosofía maya, como lo están intentando hacer en el estado de California de la Unión Americana. Hicieron que los mayas se enfrentaran los unos a los otros. Por lo consiguiente, se enfrentaron entre hermanos.
Muy bien, entonces esta idea filosófica que tenemos todos, porque Martínez Paredes decía, un solo continente, una sola cultura, ¿no? El pensamiento serpentino. Ese pensamiento serpentino porque en la primera que decía, el hombre buscaba la armonía con la naturaleza, plantas, animales y el cosmos. Entonces, tenemos animales muy emblemáticos, el jaguar es uno de ellos, y la serpiente. En todas las culturas mesoamericanas vemos que estos seres que buscamos con respeto, pedimos con respeto, los europeos no tenían esa idea de lo que era, y a los conocimientos científicos que teníamos los consideraron como brujerías o magia, que era nuestra ciencia, y lo trataron de eliminar enfrentándonos entre hermanos. Entonces trataron de erradicar el Lak'ech, tú eres mi otro yo.
Oye, Norberto, quieren que traduzca lo que dijiste y no estaba preparado, pero voy a hacer un poco, ¿ok? So he says that all this knowledge existed before the Europeans got here, but when they got here, they attempted to destroy everything, their knowledge, their philosophy, everything, including the concept he's explaining of in Lak'ech. And of course, you saw it earlier. It'll be available to everybody because it's a longer concept. In Lak'ech, Alaken. Bueno, ¿sigue?
Muy bien, entonces si quieres por diapositiva puedes hacer la traducción rápida. Muy bien.
En esta idea,
yo lo digo, en esta idea de que tú eres mi otro yo, engloba esta cuestión ya comunitaria, donde hay algo en mi pantalla que no me permite, si lo lees, por favor, luego lo explico.
Sí, el complemento de la frase alaken. Tú eres mi otro yo soy tu hermano o soy otro como tú. Es un juego de palabras y metáforas que hacen reflexionar a la sociedad maya, que yo soy igual a ti. So basically, it's the same idea that everybody's been using. It's similar. It's just a play on words, but it's basically the same idea that we are each other and we're the same as each other. ¿Sigue?
Bueno, en esta idea entonces de la filosofía, en la sociedad se habla de de una unión comunitaria. Nosotros aquí, cuando alguien sufre alguna calamidad, cuando sufre un accidente, cuando sufre algo que le afecte en sus bienes materiales o bienes emocionales, se une la sociedad, se unen las familias y nos volvemos uno solo. O sea que lo que él sufre también nosotros lo sufrimos porque al final de cuentas él es yo y yo soy él. Entonces,
voy a traducir.
Sí.
So that when bad things happen in their community, that they all unite and become one. And so that's its actual meaning. ¿Sigue?
Muy bien. La siguiente diapositiva.
Yeah, next slide.
Next.
¿Puedes verla o no?
No. Puedes leerla, por favor.
En esta profunda filosofía de la existencia del ser humano, la naturaleza y el cosmos, somos al fin Lumka, que significa seres de esta tierra o terrícolas, por lo tanto debemos tenernos respeto mutuo, porque al hacer daño al planeta, a las plantas y a los animales, al fin del daño es hacia mi persona. And that basically says that it isn't simply an issue of human beings, but the entire nature and the cosmos, because we're all one. If you damage the plants, etc., you damage the planet and you damage ourselves, you damage me. ¿Sigue?
Sí, en esta idea que acabas de leer, de que si le hacemos daño al planeta, le hacemos daño a las plantas, le hacemos daño a los animales, al cosmos, al fin nosotros somos los que estaremos sufriendo, somos nosotros en esta idea de Lum-Cabón terrícolas. Recuerden que nosotros, en tus textos escritos que no he podido leer porque están en inglés, pero hablas del maíz, Al final de cuentas, un maya es una persona hecho de la planta de maíz. Entonces, en esta idea, nosotros estamos al hacer daño. Por eso, ese de mi hermano, mi otro, la planta es mi otro, porque yo al final de cuentas soy hecho de maíz. Soy una persona de maíz, el hombre maya es una planta de maíz. Entonces, con mucho respeto al trabajar el campo, tenemos que pedirle permiso al dueño del monte, que es el Lak'ech, y pedirle la ayuda de todos los seres y del planeta y de los astros como la luna, Venus, para que nos pueda dar al final de cuentas la energía para que podamos tener una buena cosecha y seguir viviendo, porque al final de cuentas yo soy hecho de maíz. No sé si lo puedes decir.
Sí, basically saying that we are people of maize, we are plants. And Norberto, me han dicho mensaje que ya nomás tenemos 2-3 minutos. Puedes hacer una conclusión y se disculpan porque lo que pasó.
Sí. Entonces, al final, ¿qué estamos haciendo nosotros en México, en los pueblos originarios? En la Secretaría de Educación estamos en esta filosofía maya, enseñándola en los programas de estudio. Lo englobamos en 3 cosas: protección y equilibrio con la naturaleza para vivir en armonía. El otro es la producción y el intercambio y la ayuda mutua para el buen vivir. Y el tercer punto que estamos trabajando en las escuelas es la organización comunitaria, tradiciones y la memoria histórica. No sé, ahí ya que lo traduzcas, don Roberto.
Sí, nos estaba mandando un mensaje para que movieran el slide, pero básicamente, sí, ahí están, se entienden 3, I'm talking in Spanish, sorry. Yeah, there's 3 projects regarding all of this, but again, I didn't catch it because I was trying to send a message, but let me see real quick. Yeah, it's just basically to to teach that idea and pretty much what everybody's doing already here, but to teach people to live in harmony with each other, and that means beyond human beings, but also again everything, the plants, the cosmos, everything. ¿Tienes una conclusión o ya terminaste?
Ya con esa, la conclusión es que la filosofía maya lo tenemos presente, es una lucha que hemos hecho los maestros de los pueblos originarios para que el gobierno mexicano pueda tenerlo en los planes y programas. Es un logro que hemos tenido. Entonces, podemos decir que está viva esta filosofía en lo que estamos haciendo los maestros a diario con los alumnos.
Bueno, mira, te quieren dar las gracias y dicen que te invitan porque como sabes lo que pasó, ¿verdad? So I'm telling them that he's going to be invited back to explain it further. And next time, I think there'll be several other scholars because he's the only one that has written already the response, but there's others working on it. 3 other Maya scholars and linguists are working on this also, and a hip hop artist. Bueno, muchas gracias, pero a ver, Lupe, are you next or?
Trish is gonna close us out, I think.
Okay, good. Gracias, Norberto.
De nada.
Gracias a Norberto y Roberto for your amazing presentation of knowledge that is thousands and thousands of years old, that through colonization has been smashed and denigrated, and we're seeing that again here in California. And so we thank all of our presenters so much today for explaining the foundational epistemological, ontological, the knowledge, the wisdom of these rituals, but more than that, right? That they represent the knowledge that we are trying to resurrect and honor and bring back in ethnic studies, and allow us to open our minds and our hearts to all the ways of knowing that have been oppressed. I'd like to just quickly ask you to save the date for March 19th. We will have an Institute on Translanguaging and Ethnic Studies, the importance of language and culture that are torn apart in our schools, and how ethnic studies sutures those back together. It will be a very powerful workshop on language and ethnic studies. Also, please check back on our websites as we're developing our curriculum. It is time consuming, and we are all volunteers, so please thank you for your patience, and do check out what we do have on the website. Some of you asked about white folks and ethnic studies. We've had some workshops on that. We have another one coming up, Second Solidarity, that we'll email to all of you so you can sign up for that. And finally, we encourage you, if you are able, to donate to Liberated, as we are working to provide these resources and materials to all of us to liberate and create self-determined education for everyone. Thank you so much for being here on a Saturday and staying late. You're all amazing. Keep in touch, and we just thank you so very, very much for being here.